Hi everybody, it's Jen. Welcome back to my channel, Hallmark Plus More, where we watch and talk about shows, movies, mysteries, Hallmark ornaments, and anything else that floats our boat. So today I'm going to be reviewing NCIS Origins, Season 1, Episode 10. It airs on CBS and it stars Austin Stowell as a young Leroy Jethro Gibbs and is also narrated by Mark Harmon, who I love, of course. Before I get into this episode, I just want to say thank you to everybody who likes, subscribes, watches my videos. I appreciate you so much. So, getting into this episode, I hope you enjoyed this episode. It was definitely different because it really focused on Gibbs. It really focused on his life after, Shannon and Kelly, and really after killing Pedro, we find out. So, definitely a different kind of episode simply because there was no case. This was kind of the first episode, probably in NCIS history and all the franchise histories, where they didn't follow a case. They just really focused on Gibbs and kind of his story and what's been going on with him as he grieves. So it starts out with a flashback, basically from last week. I kind of was talking about last week where Layla was livid, right? When she basically finds out that Franks and Gibbs knew that Pedro wasn't alive. So it kind of puts in perspective why Gibbs wasn't so upset. Like during the case last week, when they found out Pedro was involved, Layla was like, oh, okay, how is Gibbs going to handle this? I don't know how Gibbs is going to be because it's involving Pedro. And he was very calm, collect throughout the whole thing. Like, okay, we're going to find Pedro. And I was kind of like, why isn't he more upset or at least more agitated? Not, because Gibbs is a quiet guy, but he didn't even seem agitated. And now we know why, because the whole time they're going through the case from last week, he had already killed Pedro 6 months ago. So, they're tracking Pedro with this, sex ring. And he knows with the missing girl, he knows that Pedro is already dead. So basically, she wants to quit the team. She's like, I don't trust you. I don't trust Franks. I definitely don't trust you and Franks together. So, and she sets an appointment for Wheeler, to kind of have a meeting with him to kind of get off the team, get on another team. And then she has to teach Gibbs the camera, right? They have a dark room. Remember, this was years ago. It's not as digital, it's not digital. They have to develop all the film. And they're in there for 10 days. And they talk camera, they talk film, and narrated by Mark Harmon. He's like, I learned a lot about camera. I learned a lot about developing film. We didn't talk about it. It took 10 days. She finally spoke to me. I don't know if she needed the courage to know what to say or the vent that leads into Wheeler's office and she didn't want to say anything before Wheeler went on vacation. Like, he doesn't know, but they didn't talk for 10 days. And basically, she didn't turn him in. She just feels like she can't trust him, is really what she was saying. And at that point, you kind of hear Mark Harmon narrate too, this is the first Christmas without my family. I don't have Shannon, I don't have Kelly, and now I've lost Layla. Not that I have Layla, not that I'm dating her, but she's the only other woman kind of in my life right now, and I've just lost her too, is kind of what he's saying. So he's kind of emotionally down in the dumps too. And then you see a flashback, another flashback to 6 months ago, right after he kills Pedro, right? He goes down to Mexico, kills him, comes back, and he's still conflicted. He's still got all the paperwork for Pedro, in his apartment, and he makes a mess. He gets angry. He starts throwing stuff. And breaking things, and basically his landlord comes and is like, all right, I've had it, like, you've got a couple warnings, you're out. So Ruth, which is the landlord, we saw her once in one of the earlier episodes when he moves into the apartment. Very quick kind of cameo. She's kind of an older lady, very stern, not too friendly, just matter of fact, this is the apartment. And that was it. You saw her the one time. Well, in this episode, you're going to see her more, but she comes in and basically kicks him out. You're done. Like, I'm not giving you any more warnings. You're done. And Gibbs is like, get out or I call the cops. And he kind of starts to get upset with Ruth. And then he's like, all right, fine, I'm out. Like, don't call the cops. Like, I'm out. And he is basically living in his pickup truck, which isn't a big deal for Gibbs. I mean, he's military, he can deal. But he keeps calling Frank's. And you hear the narrating of Mark Harmon going, I wasn't calling Frank's for a place to stay. I was calling Frank's to talk to him because he's the only other person that knows what really happened. And I need to talk to somebody about what I did and my feelings. And Frank's is really the only person that he can confide in because he's the only person that knows. And he's like, it's not for a place to stay. And then you see him get off the phone. He doesn't get Frank's. Frank's is ghosting him, basically. And he goes to lie down the back of his pickup truck where he's been sleeping for the past 2 or 3 days. And it starts raining. And then the landlord walks by and it is like, fine, come home. And the landlord, Lord Ruth, calls him a drama queen. And to me, I started laughing because, I mean, that's probably the one and only time in history that anybody is calling Gibbs a drama queen. So I thought that was funny. Like, fine, drama queen, you can come home. It's raining. You're sleeping in your truck. I get it. Whatever. Come home. So, Gibbs is like, all right, he comes home and she's basically like, look, you got to pay for the damages. I'm keeping your security deposit, but you can stay. And he's like, fine. And she's like, you know what? I wasn't born yesterday. I read the papers. I know who you are. Like, I know this is rough, and she is kind of a reserved person herself. She doesn't open up. So then she just brings a puzzle over, like a 1,000-piece puzzle. And they start doing the puzzle in silence. They both have their corners. And then you see, they don't really talk. They do a couple puzzles, different puzzles. So you can tell time's going by. He gives her a beer. She brings over a record player and they're playing music. And then finally, they kind of break the silence and say something. And she's like, you need to stop. You're a loser. We're not going to do another puzzle. Like, get a job, do something. And Gibbs is kind of like, wait, we've been doing puzzles and now all of a sudden you're upset. So she calls him a drama queen. She calls him a loser, but it's a wake up call for him. She's like, whatever, you can keep the puzzle. This is ridiculous. You're a loser. You got to get up and do something with your life. So, like I said, Gibbs is kind of like thrown back by it because this is like their 5th puzzle. But he gets up and gets a job at a grocery store as like a bagger at a grocery store. And she sees that he's got this job, and then she starts coming over with the puzzles again. So I feel like she's like, all right, you're at least making a living, you're got a job. And so they start doing puzzles again. And when he goes into the grocery store one day when he's working, he sees Frank and Tish go through the checkout. And he's bagging, their groceries. And he tries to talk to him. And Frank just blows him off. Like, can we talk tonight? Can we talk tomorrow? Can we talk the next day? And Frank is like, no, I'm busy. Like, he really just blows him off. And then, he finally talks to him for a couple minutes. Like, Tish is like, I'm going to wait in the car. Like, you have a couple minutes now. Tish is kind of just talk to him and get it over with. He's been through a lot. So Frank basically says, like, look, I don't want any of your emotional crap. Like, I know I'm the only person you can talk to, but I don't want you to talk to me about it because I don't want that burden. I don't want that as my problem. So Frank's is kind of really harsh, blows him off, whatever. So he's kind of got to go back and take it. Ruth has been the only person that's been there for him, and she doesn't even really talk to him. And she, so he kind of comes home from getting blown off with Frank's and sees that people are stealing Ruth's stuff. So Ruth hops in his truck and they tailgate it to chase these guys. And Ruth gets the license plate, but like there's something in something in Gibbs rather. And he's like pedal to the metal, like he is flooring it. And Ruth is like, slow down, I got the license plate. Like, you're going to kill us. Like, there's no reason to go fast, right? And I think it's that protective thing. He's going through losing his wife and daughter. He's got any other women in his life. He feels like he has to protect them, right? So after that, he slows down and Ruth is like, whoa, wait, okay. Like, you just almost killed me. And they kind of have a heart-to-heart. They pull, because they're in the middle of nowhere, right? On this long dirt road following these people that took their stuff. And they have a couple beers, and she opens up to him. Like, hey, I have a son. I'm a crap mom. Like, I've never done anything right. And Gibbs opens up to Ruth and basically says, yeah, I killed the guy who killed my wife and daughter. Like, I hunted him down and killed him. And she's like, really? Did you just admit that? Like, I just told you I was a crap mom and you just told me you killed somebody? Like, whoa, this is heavy stuff. And so you kind of build that friendship. And it's one of those things where when you're in a low place, when you're at rock bottom, you find friendships in the unlikely places, right? Like I said, you saw her that one time when he got the apartment. She just had a quick cameo, and you never thought you'd see the landlord again. And here she is, a vocal point in this episode, and a vocal point in his life. I mean, this is definitely a big turning point for him, right? I mean, he loses his wife and daughter. He's strained his relationship with his dad. He hasn't even had the courage to tell his dad that he didn't go back in the Marines, right? I mean, after he gets injured and his family is killed, he doesn't go back to the Marines. He just basically sits in his apartment. And like she said, you're a loser. You get a job. He gets a job. He confronts Frank. Frank blows him off. He's got nobody. And he finds this friendship with Ruth. And it's really kind of heartwarming because she's like, look, I'm not a good person. And Gibbs is like, well, I did a not so good person thing. I did this. And they kind of bond, right? And she becomes his best friend, basically, his only friend. And even though they don't speak, I feel like, it's like they always say, you've been married for so long, you're happy in the silence. Like, you understand the silence. You don't have to always be talking. Comfort, I guess, is what I'm looking for, the term. Your comfort in the silence. And I feel like that was his relationship with Ruth. You know what I mean? They could sit there and do a puzzle for hours and not talk, and they have this mutual respect now for each other. So they've really become friends. She confides in him. He confides in her. Like I say, they do the puzzles. And he says that was a turning point. Them sitting on the back of the pickup, drinking the beer. And she basically says, look, you hunted somebody down that the police could not find, and you took care of matters yourself. Like, he basically is realizing things about himself that he never thought. Ruth is saying, look, you're good. You're good at this. You're a good man. You're strong. You're smart. You know what I mean? You would be a damn good cop. And that's a quote. I don't usually, but her quote, you would be a damn good cop. So she kind of convinces him to, like, hey, she builds that confidence in him. She is the reason kind of he is where he is, on why he started his career. You all think it's Frank's, and we are led to believe that because he still talks to Frank's. You see the adult Leroy Jethro Gibbs. I mean, you see, when Mark Harmon played him, he still had that relationship with Frank's up until Frank's died. So you always think Frank's, and you kind of see earlier in other episodes, Frank sticks his neck out for him, but he's not the reason he joined NIS. It's Ruth. Ruth encouraged him, told him, built up his confidence, told him he was a good person, told him he was strong, told him he could do it. And he basically went to training camp because of Ruth's confidence in him, and that he was competent and able to do it. And the whole time in training in FLETC, she's writing him letters, and the letters mean everything, right? You always hear from military personnel, letters from home, care packages, they mean so much. And Gibbs kept all of her letters, right? So he graduates, comes home, and he sees a bruise on her arm. And he's like, oh my gosh, are they back? Is somebody abusing you? And she basically tells him, I didn't want to tell you this. This is your first day at work, but I have blood cancer, the cancer that is not curable. Like, I'm dying. And that was really hard for him to hear. He heard all this, and Ruth basically opens up to him. And Gibbs, his world is colliding and being destroyed again, right? He lost Shannon and Kelly. He builds this great friendship with Ruth, an unlikely place. She encourages him, kind of as that, she even said, you might be a crappy mom, but you're a great big sister. So she's, Gibbs kind of has that chivalry, kind of that sisterly friendship and kind of love, family love for her, and finds out she's dying of cancer, and there's nothing he can do about it. So this is another woman in his life that he can't protect, and that is going to die, and that's really hard for him to hear. And that's the same day as his psych eval. So obviously, he's a little messed up in the head and the mind mentally to go into this psych eval, because you've seen in previous episodes he failed his his psych eval. But that's a lot to take in. He's finding out Ruth is dying, and Ruth didn't tell him because she wanted him to go through school. So same day as the psych eval, he doesn't know that he failed it, but you kind of get that feeling. It's like when you're in high school or college and you take an exam. If you got the questions right or not. Like, you can walk out of an exam and go, I aced it. Or you can go walk out of the exam and go, yeah, I didn't know any of those answers, I failed. So Gibbs was kind of the same way with this psych eval. He's like, yeah, I didn't do good. I failed it. And he goes to the bar. He makes a phone call to Ruth and kind of says, I can't believe you didn't tell me. And kind of has and he keeps drinking, and then he gets into a bar fight, and he gets arrested and he goes to jail, and Ruth is there to bail him out. Frank shows up because at the bar, the bartender knew Frank, so the bartender called Franks. Franks goes and sees that another woman is going to bail him out, Ruth. And Ruth is like, you probably don't remember meeting me, but, I met you one time when I showed, him the apartment, and you blew him off. And Ruth has this, I call it a heart-to-heart. Ruth basically has this dialogue and this discussion with Franks, in my opinion, is one of the best dialogues probably going to be in the whole series, because I absolutely love everything she said to him. She basically tells him, like, look, he had nobody. You turned on him. He needed your support. He had nobody. I'm his best friend. And Franks is like, you're his best friend. And she basically tells him off. But Franks needed to hear that. Like, I understand. And Frank's like, that's not my problem. And she's like, you don't want it to be your problem, but it is your problem. And, I loved everything she said to him. And then Franks is kind of taken back, obviously, from this discussion. And he leaves, and Ruth, bails him out. So Gibbs doesn't even know that Frank showed up, right? Because Ruth bails him out. And by the time by the time Gibbs comes out to be released, Franks is already gone. But that heart to heart, so to speak, between Ruth and Franks, I think, is a very pivotal moment, because I feel like Frank steps up. You can even see when Gibbs gets into another fight, Franks comes to get them. And he's like, no, you don't understand. I failed my psych eval. I just got the email, or not email, but I just got the call that, they refused my application. And Franks is like, I know, I called them. I had them refuse you because you're coming to work for me. And he has the temporary, agent, he's the probie now. And so I feel like that conversation that Franks has with Ruth really hit him hard. He really thought about that. And he later tells Gibbs about the conversation that Ruth had. So, Franks tells them, like, he doesn't even try to keep it all inside. He's like, look, I went to pick you up from jail, and Ruth basically blah, blah. So the fact that, Gibbs admits that, and of course you don't see that scene. You hear Mark Harmon as the narrator say, Franks later told me about his conversation with Ruth. But yeah, I think this was a very loaded episode. For an episode to be maybe the first in an NCIS franchise history, maybe, that doesn't actually have a case, it was loaded with a lot of information. I feel like we learned a lot more about Gibbs. And the phone call. You see throughout, he gets this phone call, and he's very, emotional about the phone call. And he goes out and buys wood, and he starts making shelves for, one of the storage rooms downstairs. And the last scene in the movie is Layla comes in and is like, hey, Gibbs, what's going on? Like, we need to talk. Is there something going on? And he says, yeah, it's a long story. And Layla was like, look, my meeting with Wheeler, because then you go present day. My meeting with Wheeler isn't until Monday. I have time. And he basically tells her, and you can hear Mark Harmon, because of course you're not going to see or relive everything, but you hear Mark Harmon go, I told Lola everything. I told her all about Ruth. I told her about, everything. And he told her about the phone call. I got the phone call today that Ruth died. And that got me choked up, because when you saw that he got the phone call, you realized that's what it was. You didn't know at the beginning before you heard about Ruth, but once you heard about that she was dying of blood cancer, and then you see in present day, he gets a phone call and it chokes him up, and he goes to get the wood, which besides fishing, you all know, if you know NCIS and Gibbs, he loves to fish, which he was taught by his dad. So that was something him and Jackson shared. But woodworking was also something he shared. He said, besides fishing, building stuff was something we could do with my dad, because, you can always mold wood, you know what I mean? And that's why he did that too. He hears the news from Ruth, another woman in his life, that's gone now, that he couldn't save. So he goes down and he starts doing something familiar, right? And I feel like we're the same way. We're emotional. If something hits me hard, if I hear bad news, I clean. And some people do other things. People work through their grief. You see people who have lost loved ones and they work overtime. They just want to get it out of their mind. And like I say, I clean. Like everybody has their thing that they do when they're emotional that, lets them not think about. Listen to music, driving. I did that when I was younger. I would just drive and listen to music and clear my head. Whatever you have to do to kind of get back right emotionally. And with Gibbs, it was building, so he could get wood, and he was building shelves for the storage. So that's kind of, and then in the end, Layla's like, look, I'm not going to leave the team, but thank you for telling me. So I feel like that was a pivotal point also in Gibbs and Layla's relationship. So much. This was such a loaded episode. It tells us so much about how Gibbs is the way he is, and also why he's so protective of Layla. Because he feels like, there's so much he can't control. He wants to protect the women in his life, because he lost his wife and daughter. He lost his mom. He was basically raised by just his dad, Jackson. And then he loses his best friend, his only friend, Ruth. So, and now I don't think he has romance feelings for Layla. I think he just has a protective, like, brother-sister love for Layla. I don't know. We'll see what happens. I hope they don't get romantically involved, just because I like Gibbs to have a non-sexual romantic woman in his life. But we'll see how the series goes. I like them just being friendship, having each other's back, and kind of having that friend, because he doesn't have a lot of friends. So I definitely found out so much about Gibbs, about his past, about Frank's, about Layla. So I thought it was a great episode. And I definitely look forward to the next one, which I believe will be in the new year. So until January, I hope you enjoyed my review. And until next time, bye.